I thought I knew my husband of 8 years until he humiliated me in front of his entire family. What I did next changed everything between us forever. Last Saturday started like any other weekend. I woke up early to prep for his family's annual summer barbecue, the one I'd been helping organize for the past 5 years. I spent 3 hours making my famous potato salad, homemade coleslaw, and those mini cheesecakes everyone always raves about. I even picked up his favorite beer and made sure we had enough ice for everyone. The thing is, I've been running our household finances for years while he focuses on his career. I handle everything from investment decisions to insurance claims, from budgeting our monthly expenses to researching our major purchases. I've saved us thousands by switching providers, negotiating better rates, and finding deals. But apparently, none of that matters because I don't have a traditional job outside the home. When we arrived at his parents' house, I was carrying 2 heavy dishes while he walked ahead empty-handed, already cracking jokes with his brother. His sister-in-law immediately complimented my potato salad from last year, saying how much everyone had been looking forward to it. I felt proud. I'd actually experimented with a new recipe that took me 4 tries to perfect. Everything seemed normal until his cousin started talking about her new promotion at work. She was excited, sharing details about her increased responsibilities and salary bump. Everyone gathered around, asking questions and congratulating her. I was genuinely happy for her. She'd worked really hard for this opportunity. Then his uncle turned to me and asked what I did for work. It was an innocent question, one I'd been asked countless times before. I usually just mention that I manage our household and finances, maybe add something about freelance projects I occasionally take on. But before I could even open my mouth, my husband jumped in. He laughed and said I was just a housewife who spent his money and watched TV all day. The words hit me like a physical blow. The entire group went silent. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger, but I was too shocked to respond immediately. His mom looked uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. I excused myself to help in the kitchen, where I spent the next 20 minutes trying not to cry while arranging appetizers. His sister followed me and gently asked if I was okay. I nodded and forced a smile, but inside I was falling apart. This was the man who told me he loved and respected me, who said he appreciated everything I did for our family. The rest of the barbecue was torture. Every conversation felt awkward, like people were looking at me differently. I kept replaying his words in my head, wondering if this was how he really saw me. When someone complimented my cheesecakes, I barely managed to thank them. I felt invisible, worthless, like I'd been reduced to nothing more than a lazy stereotype. During the drive home, I finally found my voice. I asked him why he said what he said. He brushed it off, claiming it was just a joke and that I was being too sensitive. He said everyone knew he was kidding and that I shouldn't take everything so seriously. But I saw the faces of his family members. Nobody was laughing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the ways I contribute to our relationship and our home. I manage our entire household, coordinate repairs and maintenance, handle all our correspondence and appointments. I research every major purchase we make, from appliances to insurance policies. I've saved us more money than most people make in a year through careful budgeting and smart decisions. I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself in trying to be the perfect supportive wife. I put his career first, his comfort first, his needs first. And what did I get in return? Public humiliation and dismissal of everything I do. Update 1. I decided I needed to take action. The next Monday, I started documenting everything I do around the house and for our family. I made a detailed list of every task, every responsibility, every way I contribute to our life together. The list was longer than I expected, pages and pages of daily, weekly, and monthly tasks that I handle without him even noticing. Then I did something I'd never done before. I calculated the monetary value of my contributions. I researched what we'd pay for a housekeeper, a personal assistant, a financial advisor, a meal planner, and all the other roles I fill. The number was staggering, over $60,000 a year in services I provide for free. But the real wake-up call came when I started looking at our financial records more closely. I discovered something that made my stomach drop. For the past 2 years, he'd been transferring money to a separate account I didn't know about. Not huge amounts, just a few hundred here and there, but it added up to nearly $8,000. When I confronted him about it, he got defensive. He said it was his money and he could do what he wanted with it. He claimed he was saving for a surprise for me, but couldn't explain why he'd been so secretive about it. The more questions I asked, the more agitated he became. I started paying attention to other things I'd been overlooking. He'd been working late more often lately, taking phone calls in the other room, being secretive about his phone. I'd attributed it to work stress, but now I wasn't so sure. That weekend, while he was out with friends, I decided to do some investigating. I checked our phone records online and found dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking as I searched the number online. It belonged to a woman, someone I'd never heard of. I felt sick. Was my husband having an affair? Was that why he was so quick to dismiss and humiliate me? Was he trying to make me look bad to justify whatever he was doing behind my back? I couldn't confront him yet. I needed more information. I started being more observant, more aware of his patterns and behaviors. I noticed he'd shower as soon as he got home from work, something he'd never done before. He'd become more critical of everything I did, finding fault with meals I cooked or how I managed household tasks. The woman's name kept appearing in his phone records. I found her social media profiles and discovered she worked at his company. She was younger, successful, everything I felt I wasn't in that moment. My heart was breaking, but I had to know the truth. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do in a million years. I used money from an old savings account he didn't know about, one I'd kept from before we married. The investigator was professional and understanding, explaining that many people in my situation need answers before they can move forward. Update 2. 3 weeks later, the investigator called with his report. My husband wasn't having an affair, at least not in the traditional sense. The secret account and the mysterious phone calls had a different explanation, one that was somehow even more hurtful than infidelity. He was planning to leave me. The woman from his company wasn't his lover. She was a divorce attorney. He'd been consulting with her for months, discussing asset division and separation procedures. The secret account was where he'd been hiding money, trying to minimize what I'd be entitled to in a divorce settlement. The investigator had documented meetings, phone calls, and even emails discussing strategy for the divorce proceedings. My husband had been planning his exit for over 6 months, all while pretending everything was normal at home. He'd been calculating and methodical, treating our marriage like a business transaction he wanted to dissolve. But here's the part that really destroyed me. He'd been telling the attorney that I was financially dependent and contributed nothing to our household. He'd been building a case that I was essentially a leech who deserved minimal support after our marriage ended. The comment at the barbecue wasn't a thoughtless joke. It was part of a larger narrative he'd been constructing. I felt completely betrayed. Not only had he been planning to leave me, but he'd been systematically undermining my contributions and painting me as worthless. Every dismissive comment, every time he'd minimized what I did. It was all part of his strategy. I sat in my car after meeting with the investigator, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. Then something shifted inside me. The sadness transformed into determination. If he wanted to play games with our marriage and our finances, I could play too. But I was going to play to win. I spent the next week consulting with 3 different attorneys of my own. I learned about my rights, about asset division, about alimony calculations. I discovered that my contributions to our household absolutely had value, both legally and financially. I also learned that hiding assets during marriage can seriously backfire during divorce proceedings. But I also discovered something else, something that would change everything. While reviewing our financial documents with my attorney, we found discrepancies in his business expense reports. He'd been claiming personal expenses as business costs, essentially committing tax fraud. My attorney explained that this could have serious legal implications beyond just our divorce. I had copies of receipts, credit card statements, and expense reports going back 3 years. I'd kept meticulous financial records without realizing I was documenting his illegal activities. The evidence was overwhelming: expensive dinners he'd claimed were client meetings but were actually dates with me, personal travel he'd written off as business trips, even household items he'd somehow managed to claim as office expenses. My attorney suggested I could use this information as leverage in our divorce, but I had a different idea. I wasn't interested in blackmail or threats. I wanted justice, and I wanted him to face the consequences of his actions. I also realized something else during this process. I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. I'd been managing complex financial situations for years. I'd been running our household like a CEO runs a company. I had skills, intelligence, and capabilities that I'd been undervaluing, because society told me that housework wasn't real work. Final update. I decided to take control of the situation completely. Instead of waiting for him to blindside me with divorce papers, I took action first. But I didn't just file for divorce. I did something much more strategic. I documented everything. Every conversation, every financial transaction, every lie he told me. I created a comprehensive portfolio of evidence showing his deception, his financial misconduct, and his systematic campaign to undermine my contributions to our marriage. Then I made copies of all his fraudulent expense reports and tax documents. I sent them anonymously to his company's ethics department and to the appropriate tax authorities. If he wanted to claim I was worthless and contributed nothing, he could explain that to investigators while dealing with the consequences of his illegal activities. But I also did something for myself, something I should have done years ago. I started a consulting business helping other people manage their household finances and navigate complex financial situations. I realized I had expertise that people would pay for, skills that were valuable in the marketplace. Within 2 months, I had 6 clients. Within 4 months, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible. I wasn't just surviving without him, I was thriving. The divorce proceedings were swift once his attorney realized the evidence I had. His claims about my lack of contribution fell apart when faced with documentation of everything I'd done for our household. His attempts to hide assets backfired when the court discovered his deception. But the real satisfaction came when his company terminated him for ethics violations, and when he received notice that he was being audited by the tax authorities. Suddenly, he needed every penny he could get, and hiding assets from me became impossible. He tried to reconcile once he realized the full extent of what he was losing. He claimed the divorce attorney was just insurance, that he'd never really planned to leave me. He said the barbecue comment was a mistake, that he respected everything I did. But it was too late. I'd seen who he really was when he thought I wasn't looking. The most unexpected part of this whole experience was discovering who I really was. I wasn't just a housewife, I was a financial strategist, a project manager, a problem solver. I'd been running a complex operation for years without recognizing my own value. 6 months after that humiliating barbecue, I was living in my own apartment, running a successful business, and dating a man who actually appreciated my intelligence and capabilities. My ex-husband was dealing with legal troubles, job hunting, and realizing exactly how much he'd lost when he decided I was worthless. The final irony came when his mother called to apologize for her son's behavior at the barbecue. She said she'd tried to raise him better, and that she was proud of how I'd handled everything with dignity and grace. She even asked if I'd still be willing to make my potato salad for next year's barbecue. Apparently, nobody else's version comes close. I politely declined the potato salad request, but I did send her the recipe. After all, I'm not just a housewife anymore. I'm an entrepreneur and I don't work for free. Looking back, that awful moment at the barbecue was actually a gift. It forced me to see the truth about my marriage and about myself. Sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most profound transformations. I learned that respect isn't something you can demand or expect. It's something you have to require, and be willing to walk away if you don't receive it. Today, I'm grateful for every difficult moment that led me to discover my own strength. I'm grateful for the humiliation that became my motivation. And I'm especially grateful that I learned to value myself, even when the person who should have valued me most chose not to. The woman who stood silently in that kitchen, fighting back tears while arranging appetizers, doesn't exist anymore. She's been replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and infinitely more aware of her own worth. And that woman would never let anyone dismiss her as just anything ever again.